Hello, welcome back to the channel. We are continuing the Vault Tech series today with the last vault from the kind of classic Fallout 1 and 2, which is Vault 12. So we're here, I've got some friends, we've got Tycho and Ian and the bestest boy, Dogmeat. So we're just finishing off these last few ghouls. In order to get the water chips. So if you're following the plot of the original Fallout, you are sent out to find the water chip, and this is where you find it. So Vault 12 is under Bakersfield, which is near LA but not quite in LA, I believe. And we find that there's basically a population of ghouls. So there's some feral ghouls around, I think, a few of them. We've also got two different groups. So there's a group of peaceful ghouls living in the sewers, and there's a group of not so peaceful ghouls on the surface, who are backed up by a handful of super mutants. So this point in the game might very well be the point where you first encounter super mutants and ghouls as well. There's also a dead guy here, I'm not quite sure who that is. But as you can see, Vault 12 here is in a pretty rough state. And the reason that there's so many ghouls around, and some of them are quite friendly still, is because the experiment for this vault was that the door wasn't going to close properly. So obviously every vault, I think I can't do anything else with the, yeah, that's just the water processing. So the only machine that's working is the water processing computer. So the peaceful ghouls in the sewers were getting their water from the vault system, because the water pump that they had up on the surface had been taken over by Set and his gang and the super mutants as well. So you have to kind of deal with that to get in here. So we have killed many ghouls and super mutants to get to this point, but we've now collected the water chip that we can take back to Vault 13, which ends that first part of the plot line, but we've seen the kind of super mutants and things. So that introduces the second major plot point for Fallout. But yeah, the experiment here was to see what happened when people were exposed to, essentially the idea would be it would be low levels of radiation for a long period of time, and unsurprisingly, as we know well in the Fallout universe, what happens is ghouls. So ghoulification can be a slow process. It can happen quickly as well, as we've seen with like Hancock in Fallout 4. He actually has only been a ghoul for, if I remember rightly, it's like 10 years or something, because he took this experimental radiation chem, and that turned him into a ghoul. And we see that there was experiments into that before the war, because you've got Eddie Winter, who has also survived the war as a ghoul. And there's quite a few people that were stuck on the surface. So you know, quite a lot of the known feral ghouls that you meet were trapped on the surface. But certainly in this part of the world, there's a good chance that some of them came from this vault. So they've essentially established it as Necropolis, which means, you know, means City of the Dead, which kind of ties into the fact that ghouls are kind of a little bit like zombies. So yeah, the door's damaged. So the point here was that the door was never meant to fully close properly, which means that radiation would leak in, and despite the assurances that we had at location. So we got this holotape from somebody in the hub, which is an update about the Western United States vault locations. So Vault 12, under the sprawling metropolis of Bakersfield, Vault 12, built with every amenity in mind for the prospective vault dweller, and was given the Pressed Vault Suit Award for attention to preparedness. So far underground, so the protection that the vault dwellers receive will be unprecedented. Much like all the other vaults, Vault 12 has been fitted with the newest in vault water purification systems, able to take even the waste located in the sewers of Bakersfield. This system is able to deliver over 15,000 gallons of pure, refreshing drinking water every day. So this is essentially what people were told Vault 12 was going to be. And where it is, so we know we're in Bakersfield right now, and they had the latest water purification system, but obviously there's no mention of the fact that it's like, oh yeah, actually, but the door's not going to close, so to hell with you, essentially. And yeah, so as far as we can tell, I mean, the thing about the vault experiments as well is that some of them are quite outlandish, and it's just like, what were you actually hoping to achieve with this? But this one, obviously studying the effect of low-grade kind of radiation exposure on humans and what happens to them, and the answer is ghouls, although whether Vault-Tec are aware that the answer is ghouls or not, I'm not sure. But it's interesting nonetheless. One thing that's really awkward about this is the ladder system, because you have to have your mouse on exactly the right spot. But yeah, so this here is the kind of water shed of Necropolis. So the kind of good ending for Necropolis is to basically fix this water pump, which means going down into the sewers, collecting the materials, and then the ghouls will give you some repair skill books if your repair skill's not quite there, and then you can repair this, and then if you do that, then they're happy for you to take the water chip, because they'll still get water, but you can go and save your vault. So this is the kind of location we're in. There's maybe still a couple of ghouls wandering about, and I did notice earlier that there is somebody here, the Children of the Cathedral member, so that's something that we'll get to kind of later on in the plot. Why did you go that way, Tycho? Honestly, these guys. But yeah, so there is still stuff going on around here, but yeah. So we're gonna head for the exit grid, and then I can show you where we are on the map. So say there's not really much to the vaults in these games, because there's not like a bunch of terminals to read and things like that, unlike the kind of 3D games. Presumably just the setup didn't call for it, and this obviously was the first game, so the lore and everything was still kind of, had only just really been developed. But you can see, so let me just orientate myself. Yeah, so this is us at Necropolis, that's the hub, Junktown, that's Vault 15, that's where the cans are, that's Shady Sands, and that's Vault 13. So yeah, so it's called Necropolis now, but that is the location of Vault 12, and then I'm pretty sure this will be the Boneyard, which is part of the kind of LA metropolis areas. LA's kind of this area, I believe, from the map. So that's Vault 12. I say not a huge amount to it, but you know, it's probably the first one that really kind of highlights that, you know, not all the experiments that Vault-Tec did on the vaults were beneficial to the vault dwellers or a good thing. You know, that some of them were actively harmful, because I would assume that while probably a lot of the vault dwellers did become ghouls, there's a very high chance that a fair number of them also died, whether directly from sort of chronic radiation sickness or things like cancer, and birth rates would be a problem as well with a lot of chronic radiation exposure. That can lead to damage in the gonads, ovaries, testicles, so damaging production of sperm, production of eggs, and therefore the ability. And then even if a woman was to get pregnant, the radiation can lead to my brain has just gone, what's the word? Is it teratogenic? I'm having a complete brain fart. Teratogenic. Yes, teratogenic is the word I'm looking for. I knew. You can tell that I've not exercised my medical muscles for a little while at this point. But yeah, teratogenic, so radiation, we know it can be teratogenic and carcinogenic. So teratogenic meaning that it can damage the normal development of an embryo or a fetus, so in other words causing birth defects, which could be fatal, or could have a severe impact on the fetus's quality of life when it's born and becomes a child. And carcinogenic means causing cancer or increasing the risk of cancer, and we know that radiation does that. It's quite well documented that the first doctors and scientists that were experimenting with x-rays, pretty much the majority of them ended up with cancer, and ended up dying because of it. Same as the radium girls, which I talked about in my science fallout video about radiation. So if you haven't watched that, I would maybe recommend going and giving that a watch, because it's quite an interesting, the radium girls is quite an interesting story. It's a really sad story as well, but it really highlighted and did kind of go quite a long way to making changes to kind of health and safety legislation at work, and better protections for employees in the workplace for keeping them safe, so that they have access to proper PPE, and risk assessments and things are done. And if people are working with dangerous materials, whether it's radioactive materials, whether it's nasty chemicals, whether it's infectious agents, so if you're working in a medical lab or something and you're working with highly pathogenic bacteria and things like that, that steps are taken to ensure that things are done safely, and anyone that's sort of worked in the medical field will be quite familiar with that. We have lead aprons and thyroid protectors for if you're dealing with x-rays, or worse still CT. I mean, CT is a really useful diagnostic piece of equipment, but it's also I quite like this wee map system, and you get like a picture of the thing, but it's like 3D x-ray, so it's x-ray on steroids, which means that the radiation exposure is much higher, and the machines are much better than they used to be, so there's not so much kind of scatter radiation and things, but it is still something to be conscious of, that if you're dealing with that day in day out, that you're taking steps to protect yourself. Same thing for oncology wards, so anyone that's involved in treating cancer, because unfortunately while the things that cause cancer are bad, the medications, a lot of the medications that are used to treat cancer are also bad, and in some cases ironically can be carcinogenic, but they're what's called cytotoxic, which means so cyto means cell, toxic obviously means toxic too, so these drugs kill cells, and they tend to target rapidly dividing cells because that's what cancer is. But the problem is that there's normal parts of the body that have cells that are frequently dividing. Most notably your skin and your hair, which is constantly getting replaced in a cycle. The gastrointestinal tract, where the lining of the intestines is kind of getting worn away as food passes through, that's a normal part of it. So the lining of your intestine has to be constantly replaced, so the cells need to keep dividing to do that. And most importantly, the bone marrow, so that's where all your blood cells are produced, both your red blood cells for oxygen and your white blood cells for your immune system. So that's why chemotherapy can be so unpleasant and can come with quite a lot of nasty side effects and things. So it's an interesting thing, and it's something that you see in this part in Fallout, especially, that a lot of the companies were really not that keen on health and safety legislation and things, and looking after their employees properly. When they're literally policing toilet breaks and they have to be under 2.5 minutes, which is kind of a ridiculous notion to us, I suppose, but it's something. And there was a lot of kind of horrible things going on in terms of workers' rights. Notably, Vault-Tec are particularly fun for that, as Nuka-Cola Corporation. There was a lot of kind of horrendous stuff happening there. Particular highlight was when they had to remind all employees not to put a black mamba in the child's petting zoo. You'd think that would be common sense for somebody that's responsible for looking after reptiles. They would know that maybe one of the most dangerous venomous snakes in the world shouldn't be in the child petting zoo, but and it is something that's absolutely consistent through all the Fallout games. So we can see here, Vault 12, it's just like, yeah, let's just not close the door properly and see what the radiation does to these people. And again, it's my question of, is that what were they hoping to achieve? Because if the ultimate goal was to colonize other planets and go to space, I mean, sure, there's cosmic radiation, and there is radiation. Our atmosphere does block a lot of radiation from getting to us, because that's the whole issue with the ozone layer and climate change and all that kind of thing. But it's just like, okay, so it can turn people into ghouls, so what are you going to do with that information, kind of thing. And of course there's still the question of if Vault-Tec are out there, and if anybody's actually collecting all the data from the vaults. We know that some of them at least have remote systems available where they can be accessed remotely from an outside company, like CIT, the Institute, can access the system for Vault 111 remotely. So can Vault-Tec do that? Are there high ups sitting at, in a vault somewhere? Are they downloaded into computers? It'd be interesting to know, and I wonder if that is something that will eventually be explored, maybe with the TV show, maybe with a future game, who knows. But yep, so that's us kind of finished with the vaults on the west coast for now. Fallout 2, I don't believe that you visit any new vaults in Fallout 2. It's all very much more focused. You do meet kind of Vault 8, so I'll maybe kind of cover that at some point. But I don't have a save file at all for Fallout 2, so that's something I'll need to kind of work up to get to the point where you get to Vault City, which is the dwellers of Vault 8. So if you remember when we were talking about Vault 13, the extra water chips that Vault 13 should have got sent to Vault 8, and Vault 13 got an extra GEC instead, which is kind of what triggers this whole the whole plot line. It's the reason that you end up leaving the vault. So I'm just going to put that there as a save game. I'll know what it means, so that's the main thing. But yeah, so you're really, this is the first vault that really kind of highlights that Vault-Tec aren't really all on the up and up. I mean, Vault 15 obviously has been long abandoned, but you learn that the people that were in Vault 15 eventually, they just decided to leave and go their separate ways, and they splintered off into the different factions. So you've got the people that set up Shady Sands that would go on to become the NCR, the Khans, the Vipers, and the other guys. I can't remember their names now. Oh, that's really annoying. But yeah, so you know, they split off into all these groups, but on the whole, before, you know, Vault 15 was sort of vaguely successful, and it did work by and large like a control vault, and we know that Vault 13 was also supposed to be a control vault where there's not really an experiment, although there is some different kind of data on that. But there wasn't any real kind of horrible experiment in Vault 13, but Vault 12 is where you kind of find out that actually, you know, that one there was, that they were testing out the effect of radiation on people. And then when we get into the games down the line, Fallout 3, you know, where you've got Vault 87, where there's the FEV experiments and the super mutants, and that appears to be a different strain of the FEV from what the Master uses in this game. But then you've got Vault 106, where all the is it 106 where all the Garys are, or 108 where all the Garys are? Oh, I can't remember now. But you know, you've got that where there's just like 40 odd Garys running about stabbing anybody that's not a Gary. You know, or putting psychoactive chemicals into their filtration system. You know, I mean, Vault 22 is an absolute shit show. You know, some horrific problems that actually had consequences for the wider world, because some of the dwellers left and ended up in Zion Canyon, and that caused a lot of issues there. And you know, Vault 75, where they were basically turning children into super soldiers, and when the bombs came and everybody they just separated off all the parents and just disposed of them, killed them, disposed of them, and then kept the children, and you know, all these kind of things that are happening. It's yeah, very interesting. But that was Vault 12. So I say you've joined me. Thanks for listening. And hopefully this has been interesting. And then I think what we'll do is we'll head east, and we will tackle some of the vaults in the Capital Wasteland, and then possibly we'll head back west again and take a look at New Vegas, because I have done a bit of exploration of Vault 22 in the Fallout New Vegas series. I haven't really spoken too much about everything that happened in Vault 22, and there's a lot that I want to cover there, because I think it's both equally horrifying and fascinating, but it does also mean that we need to take a trip to Old World Blues, and we also need to take a trip to Zion Canyon, and uncover some details there, which will also include uncovering a few details about the survivalist, Randall Clark. He is a character that I would really like to cover at some point, because you can piece together a fascinating story, and quite a horrific story of the immediate aftermath of the bombs, just through this one man's journal and the experience and everything that he goes through over the years. It's really, really interesting. So that is something that I'll definitely be covering in full, but we will check in with him, because it is relevant to Vault 22, so you know, there's a lot to cover there, and quite a few of the other vaults. Vault 11 as well is one that's particularly, I think, strikes a chord with a lot of people, because again, it's one of these horrific things that just, but there's no happy ending to it. You know, it ends in tragedy, pretty much every time, unless you happen to be a protagonist of a Fallout game. It tends not to go well for people. So You know, it'd be really good to get into all of that, and there's a lot more kind of data and stuff to go through for that. You know, we've got lots of like terminal entries and things, so you know, that's going to be really interesting. But for now, I'll leave Emmy, Ian, Tycho, and Dogmeat here in Bakersfield, and we'll catch up with you next time. Thanks, bye.